Good evening, everybody. It's 6 p.m. This is our October 3rd City Council meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everybody here. I'd like to ask you to remind everyone to turn off or silence your electronic devices, please. And we can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation by Councilmember Gorlich. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. Thank you. Dear Lord, as we assemble here tonight, we continue to be thankful for our employees who continue to work tirelessly to bring our city back to normal. We pray for the victims of Puerto Rico and Las Vegas and ask that you continue to give them strength as they struggle through these hard times. We ask that the compassion, cooperation that's been shown throughout these disasters continue long after the disasters are forgotten and touch the hearts of each of us, letting us know that we are all stronger together than any of us all apart. All this we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen. Just to remind everybody, if you wish to speak on items on the agenda or not on the agenda, there are forms in the back that can be filled out and turned into the city clerk all the way to my left. And also, we've tried to speed this meeting up. It is National Night Out tonight, and a lot of the police officers and workers in the city are there providing a lot of information to our residents about the safety of our community. And I'll bring that up again later. But we'll go on to the meeting. The first item is recognitions, proclamations, presentation, and board appointments. We have a proclamation recognizing Disabilities Awareness, FAIR Fair Day. And I believe Becky Forcelli, now hopefully I pronounced that correctly, is here. She's the founder of Yes America United. And I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation. If you would like to, if you would like, it's up to you. And then I'll come down. Whereas today we celebrate the 10th Annual Families Ability Information Rallies, and whereas the City of Temple Terrace recognizes the issue of disability awareness and the need to educate the public and individuals living with disabilities so they are offered the right opportunities and responsibilities as all citizens, and whereas the city provides accommodations to enable all individuals the opportunity to give back to their community and take on the responsibility of true citizens, and whereas the city strives to break down physical barriers to enrich the lives of all people by supporting empowerment and encouraging individuals to be self-advocates and productive citizens, and whereas the goal of the Yes of America United is to provide a one-stop outreach for state and county agencies, municipalities, micro-enterprises, not-for-profits and businesses, social groups, and the arts, music, and sports, health agencies, and clubs with an entertaining and engaging way to enrich, educate, and empower our inclusive community. Now, therefore, I, Robert M. Boss, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Vice Mayor of the City of Temple Terrace, do hereby proclaim October 7th, 2017 as Disabilities Awareness Fair Day. And in Temple Terrace, and join with Yes of America United to demonstrating the partnering in the essential business. And this is from the City Council. And I'll come down and give it to you, ma'am.
Are you there? Okay.
Cameras move to the other side of the room. Thank you. Thank you. This, here you go. Okay. Thank you very much. Would you like to say
I'd like to say a couple words.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
just a little bit further? And here's the podium.
I got it. Oh, good evening. It's been a long time since I spoke in front of your council. When Mayor Joe was here, he had me up here a couple different times. I don't know if you remember that. And of course, when Councilperson Frank Chalura was at our fair a couple years ago, I understand he's on your council. I don't know where he's at, but he was a real good friend back then. Oh, you're there. I hear where you're at. Okay. Frank was really great. He came out and gave the proclamation, and this time Councilperson Sherry is going to come out and do it for us. But, you know, I just wanted to share with Temple Terrace that our partnership with you has grown over the years. It's not just the fair, but we have our senior event at the Lightfoot Senior Center with Kelly Ahern and that group, and they are absolutely one of your most awesome groups in Temple Terrace, and we are so appreciative of them. As we prepare 11 months for this event, we are hoping that you will learn about us more. For those that don't know about us, we gave you a place card, which will share with you all the things that Yes does and how you can get involved with us. And also, we've given you our most current flyer, and I spoke to someone, and they said they have a lot more there. So please take and pass them out to all your friends, and don't be shy. Put on that wonderful superhero attire and come out and be with us on October 7th. We have activities that will totally amaze you. If you have any questions, I'm sure Frank can tell you that we don't bite, but we do have a lot of fun. But again, thank you for the proclamation, and I look forward to having you guys be more involved with Yes over this next year as we prepare to make a change for people with disabilities, our seniors, our kids at risk, and our veterans, to make a difference in our community where all are accepted, all are included, and all have the same rights and privileges that anyone else has. Thank you again for allowing Yes of America United to be part of the council meeting today. And I also appreciate what you're doing for us. And I do want to thank every single one of you in your own special way that you're going to make a difference, changing not just what our children see, but what our children have to experience in the future. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am. And just for everyone's general information, the event is this Saturday, October 7th, from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the All People's Life Center at 6105 East Sly Avenue in Tampa. Next item of business is item B, Fire Prevention Week proclamation. I would, there's Chief Kemp. This is a proclamation to the Fire Chief Ian Kemp. Whereas the City of Temple Terrace is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our city, fire hazards are a serious public safety concern in Temple Terrace as well as nationally. And whereas U.S. fire departments responded to over 370,000 home fires in 2016, according to the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, and whereas U.S. home fires result in approximately 2,500 civilian deaths in 2016, representing the majority, 78% of all U.S. fire deaths, and whereas many of today's home products and furnishings produce toxic gases and smoke when burned, making it impossible to see and breathe within moments, and whereas these conditions contribute to a much smaller window of time for people to escape a home fire safely, with people having as little as 1 to 2 minutes to escape from the time the smoke alarm sounds. And whereas a home fire escape plan includes 2 exits from every room in the home, a path to the outside from each exit, smoke alarms in all required locations, and a meeting place where everyone in the home will meet upon exiting. And whereas practicing a home fire escape plan twice a year ensures that everyone in the households knows what to do in a real fire situation. And whereas the 2017 Fire Prevention Week theme, Every Second Counts, Plan 2 Ways Out, effectively serves to educate the public about the vital importance of developing a home fire escape plan with all members of the household and practicing it twice a year. Remember, the Temple Terrace Fire Department will host its annual open house on Saturday, October 14th, 2017 at Fire Station 1 from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Now therefore, I, Robert M. Boss, by virtue of the authority vested in me as Vice Mayor of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, do hereby proclaim the week of October 8th through 14th, 2017 as Fire Prevention Week. Thank you, Chief, and for everybody there, and for what you provide, and I'll come right down and give it to you, and then allow you to say a few words to people.
Honorable Mayor, Council, City Manager. Thanks again for this proclamation. This is our time of the year at the fire department. We've prepared not quite 11 months for our event, but certainly in the last month, we've been preparing. So we certainly hope everybody in the community and the council makes it out to this year's open house. We'd love to see everybody there. It's going to be bigger and better than ever before. And I would like to say, please, in all seriousness, if you do not practice escape plans with your family, especially if you have young kids, please do it. It's serious business, and you don't quite have to have as many smoke detectors at your house as I do, because my wife thinks I'm a bit of an overkill, but you do need to have more than you think you need. So please test them twice a year as well. Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is minutes of the previous meetings. First, we're going to look at approval of the September 19th, 2017 City Council meeting minutes. If the
Move to
minutes are
approve.
acceptable, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve?
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion is carried. The next item under minutes is B, approval of the September 8th, 2017 special city council meeting minutes. If the minutes are acceptable to council, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
There is a motion. Is there a second? I'll second it. Move this thing along here. Is there any discussion on it?
I did have one thing to bring up about it, and it's a minor thing, but it jumped out at me. Cheryl, in the part where it says that I agreed to be on the negotiating team for the prospective city attorney candidate, it doesn't say in there that I was asked to do that. And I mean, it looks like I just jumped up and said, "Oh, pick me," and I didn't. And so if we could put a word or two in there that I was kind of asked to do that, I didn't just jump up. Okay, thank you. Other than that, I'm fine, thank you.
You didn't jump up?
No, I did not jump up.
Okay, well, as amended with that correction.
Why me? Why me?
Can I have we have a motion approval as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion is carried. We move on to item 3, which is persons wishing to be heard on items not listed on the agenda. And if anyone would like to speak on items not on the agenda, please fill out a form in the back and turn it in to city clerk. Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. The first person I have asking to speak is Mr. Nathan Redmond. He would like to address criminal activity and personal information. Mr. Redmond.
Good evening, Vice Mayor. Good evening, council members. I thought tonight would be an appropriate night to come out here and thank the police for something that went on last week.
Name and address, please.
Sorry. Nathan Redmond, 306 Bellevue Avenue. Being that tonight is National Night Out, I thought tonight would be appropriate to come out and thank the police for response to my house. Last week, my house was subject to criminal activity, and they were able to respond within 5 minutes of us discovering the activity, so I think that it was appropriate to come here and thank them for their prompt response. The second thing I'd like to address is it came relevant to me through this incident that this homestead increase that everyone is talking about that may come onto agenda next year, it is pretty relevant that we do support that. Individuals can take that extra money and put towards home security, which better protects their homes, which better protects our community, and makes Temple Terrace a little bit safer. And the third thing I'd like to address is, in making Temple Terrace safer, I also noticed through this incident last week that there's a lot of personal information that is thrown around in the open that identifies ourselves with our addresses, and that's concerning. As people have a face, they also have an address when we come here and state our addresses. But in the police report as well, I noticed that our addresses are put down, and it states, you know, what the incident was, the address. And some of them have addresses that were redacted. Others aren't out there, but I feel like this is way too much information for public, you know, for individuals. So if there's a way that you all can take a look at that and see if that can be reduced as far as getting our information off of these open sources, I greatly appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next person wishing to speak is Allison Fernandez. You want to speak on 2 different topics? Okay, one is Temple Terrace history, the other is budget and audit. Please give your name and address, and you have
Allison
3 minutes.
Fernandez, 6601 Heatherton Court. Good evening, council members. I'll address the Temple Terrace history first. For those of you who are aware, I have been working on a project. I started out with Grant Rimby and Tim Lancaster, trying to get Temple Terrace history into our local schools. And that it's a very big project, so we've taken it down to a much smaller and hopefully more manageable process. And that is, what I hope we're going to be able to do is create a Temple Terrace fun fact of the day or the week and break it down into usefulness on the school morning shows so that we can read something and then maybe they can talk about it a little bit in their class. Every school has a morning show. This doesn't interrupt curriculum. It doesn't cause teachers to have to do anything additional, but it would help get some knowledge of our city into the heads of our students and maybe our teachers too. And so I've reached out and had several community members express interest, and they are associated with USF. So I think we have some manpower to help with that. But I wanted to put it out here to you all because my hope is after we create this, I may be coming to you and asking you all to read the fun fact at a city council meeting and maybe put it out on the Facebook page. And I may be coming to ask you to help partner to maybe create some coloring books or some things that we could put out and distribute amongst the children. So that's why I wanted to bring that to you. And hopefully that will be up and running and we'll have something to show you. So that's it for history. Now, my second thing is budget and the audit. I read the comments. I wasn't able to come to the last meeting. I was an auditor, a financial auditor with Pete Marwick, KPMG now, for 5 years. And I want to explain something to you all and to the lay public, and that is the City of Temple Terrace has a financial audit every single year. It's an independent audit by independent auditors that we hire. The auditors report to City Council. And within that audit, it's designed to test the reasonableness and fairness of the financial statements. It is not designed to tell you if your processes are working completely correctly or if there are procedural issues or other issues that may be going on. I'm not saying that those never show up. That was one of our jobs as an auditor, to offer management letter comments to the companies, our customers, in ways that they could improve their process or improve their controls, or if we notice something. And our independent auditors have done that year after year. What I hear when you're requesting an audit is that you're interested more in a complete review of internal controls, the functions of each department, and that's more of a procedural audit. And I stand wholeheartedly in agreement with you all. I think that that would be a very useful process for the city to do. I do not think that this city should hire a consultant to do this. I think that you have enough retired accountants or maybe even practicing accountants who'd each be able to take a department in the city and go through all of the internal controls and the process. To give you an example, one of my clients, Alachua General Hospital. To follow their process, I sat at intake, which was usually the emergency room, and followed the process of a patient all the way through. We have enough people that could do something like that here in our departments, at the rec center, at sanitation, at human resources. And so that would be my suggestion. I agree. I think it needs to be done. Every entity should do this over the course of their life. And I think we should also be looking at what our residents are asking for now, or what would serve our residents best. Maybe some things we've done in the past did work. Maybe it's time to change something up a little bit. So, but I ask you, if you would do this, I agree you need to do this, but I don't think you need to hire a consultant to do that. So that's it for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item, is anybody, I know some people came in late, so we're in the item part where persons wishing to be heard on items on the agenda. Is there anybody who would like to speak on an item not on the agenda? All right, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is communications and petitions. There are none. Consent agenda, we have none. I've been asked to move one of the items from new business, item 8, up before we get to our public hearings, ordinances, and resolutions. I would like to get direction from council. Do you have any objection to bringing item 8 up, 8A up,
No, no objection.
before we move on to the
No
other part of
objection.
business? Seeing none, we're going to move to quickly item 8A, which is Temple Terrace Golf and Country Club. I will have the city manager explain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor. At our previous meeting, it was requested that Councilmember Pogorlich and I kind of group up with the country club to try to figure out what direction we were headed with resolution with their problems and their issues. We have done that. I think that the country club has met with each of you individually last week. Those conversations, David and I, Mr. Pogorlich and I kind of took highlights from those discussions. We have incorporated them into a reorganization as some conditions of approval, if you would. One of the things that I think was asked of council, or will be asked of council, is a time frame so that the club can develop a reorganization plan. In doing that, David and I, Mr. Pogorlich and I came up with certain conditions, A through I, that are attached to the agenda here, is things that we thought were important as we start moving forward and trying to help the club in any way that we can. Certainly not to be a hindrance to the club as they reorganize themselves, but certainly some things that I think would set some milestones and kind of get us involved with them getting themselves reorganized. With that, I've asked the board and Mr. Whittemore and Mr. Nertney in particular to come in and kind of run through their intention moving forward and certainly talk to this body instead of individually. And David, Mr. Pogorlich and I are certainly prepared to discuss some of the things that we've kind of come up with here as far as some ideas. We're certainly hoping that we can do this, and certainly whatever we can do as city administration, we're willing to do and help the club get themselves organized. So with that, I think Mr. Whittemore has, or Mr. Nertney.
Quick clarification. I have not spoken to any of you guys on council about this. There was an insinuation that Chuck, Mr. Stevenson, and I spoke to council and got their feedback from the individual meetings. Charles did that, okay? David didn't do that, okay?
That is correct.
Thank you. Yes, John Nertney, 703 Argyle Place. First, thank you to each of you who I met with individually and not in any form or fashion of group, to get some sense of where we all felt like we were. I don't have in front of me, Mr. Stevenson, but I believe hopefully the council members have the write-up that you provided already with A through I and the conditions. Our thought is that we've been through a number of months in re-establishing the club and coming up with where we think we need to go. We feel like we've gotten enough information now that we can embark on this timeline that we've asked for. Some background. Recently, we went to the members and said, please prepay dues, 3 months or so, as much as you can. $40,000 has come in. And that was in an effort to get us through this 90 to 100-day period so that we can really put teeth into a plan, attract new capital. So we're very thankful to the members who have done that. Those who were able to did. Some did more than they were asked, and some did only what they could. The updated cash flow projection, which includes that number, has been emailed to Mr. Stevenson, Mr. Pogorlich today. I didn't send it to everybody, but I'm sure they can share. We've, over the course of the last couple of months, met with 5 industry professionals. As recently as today was the 5th. 2 managers of area clubs, 2 outside management companies, and an independent consultant. So we've done some fact-finding and some sense of who we can turn to get information. Over the next month, so if we take this 90-day period that we've talked about, over the next 30, we'll continue to get data, and we expect to have an assessment prepared. We want to hire a consultant to do this. This is not what we ought to do ourselves. So we'll be in our communications with you discussing who we think that ought to be. But we'd like to hire a consultant to assess the operations in the market and give us a sense of where they think we are and where we should go. In the next 30 days, so the month of November, we would expect to write a complete business plan that says, here's the capital we need, here's the revenue plan, here's how you ought to market yourselves. And that business plan would be something that hopefully will attract the investor that we expect to be able to attract, to reseed the club with capital. We would expect the month of December to be the time where we come to a definitive agreement with that person. And then come back to you at the end of those 3 months with the plan that we think is actionable. We'll have a discussion. We will have discussed it a lot on the way in. And then we will have done our best job at that point. Whether it's acceptable or whether it's feasible in the eyes of everybody who needs to agree, we'll have to see at the end. We have been asked, as the condition and in the discussions, to make good on the property tax bill that is an obligation of the club. We're going to do that. We've made our first installment today, as a matter of fact. So we budgeted in the cash flow that I sent to you, installments over the next months that will pay the entire amount of property taxes over the next, I think, 4 to 5 months. Only one tweak I would ask, or it's not really a tweak, but a specification in the items A through I, and that is that we would like to schedule our presentation, our formal presentation to the council for January 16th. If I'm right, the first meeting of next year is January 2nd. It's a Tuesday. Not thinking that'd be a great day to pick to do that. We may have other activities in the week prior. So we'd like to have January 16th actually go on the schedule, which would be 90 plus a couple of weeks in terms of days. But obviously, we will have been in constant contact, and you'll know where we stand by then. But if you want to think about a schedule. That's what I wanted to share with you now. I think we're excited as a club and as a board, with some reservations of excitement, but we're excited and we appreciate the work that y'all have done to help us get to where we are. Can I add anything else, Mr. Stevenson or anybody?
Council, really, I think at this time, I think what the board really needs, and I think certainly Mr. Pogorlich and I need, is some direction on whether or not this council's in agreement to give them that 90-day window. It is certainly something that is beyond council's responsibility to react that way. There's nothing in the agreement that provides for that. But I certainly do think that with their request of a 90-day window plus these few days, I think it would be prudent to allow them to kind of get themselves reorganized, stay in constant communication with us as far as what progress we're making, and certainly be available to pay the taxes that are due for the coming year. So there's some other caveats in here about foregoing deferring the lease payment that is currently their obligation until the end of the year. That is certainly something that council needs to decide whether or not they wish to do that. There is some other caveats in here that we kind of have an ability to kind of look at the books and the operations without interfering in the business, to certainly kind of maybe identify some shortfalls and provide some help, but also get a handle on where the club is from a standpoint of the council is concerned. So there are some things, I've had conversations with Mr. Nertney and Mr. Whittemore, and they seem to be in agreement with this. They do have some reservations about us attending the board meetings that I think that Mr. Pogorlich and I along with them, can kind of get worked out. It is nothing that I don't believe is insurmountable. We want to be careful not to get too involved with the business over there. Again, this is the board's business, and I'm all for giving them a chance to do this under certain conditions. So we've attached these conditions as a suggestion to council. I don't know if, Mr. Pagorich, you
If I
want to weigh
might,
in on some of
couple-
this? And
Couple of things before, this-
Just one second, before we go to council discussion, I'm just going to ask if there's any comments from the public.
fine.
So prior to us going to council discussion and possibly get back and forth with the club, is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we go to council discussion.
If I may, before we begin discussion, I just want to say that one of the other things that we agreed to that's not on here is that we've established a conference code phone number. And every Friday morning, I think it's 9 o'clock, we will be having a conference call between myself, Charles, and the members of the board. So at any given meeting, we should be able to give you an update as to where they stand on their discussions with their consultants, their hiring of consultants, where they are in the business plan. And for the public that's here and who's watching, there are expectations of the club that why they are developing their plan. For instance, that the maintenance is held up, the landscaping maintenance is held up, the interior maintenance is held up, the building itself is being maintained, so that, for all intents and purposes, as you're driving down the street, you'll see the greens are going to be kept, and the fairways are being kept, and the curb line is being edged, and around the trees is being edged, so that, this is not just, let's just sit on our chairs and wait for a plan. That they have obligations to keep the club up. They have, the reorganization plan has to address specifically all the operations of the club, the bar, the banquet, the golf, other non-member events, and how they're going to market the club. And there's words like aggressive marketing campaign in the conditions. I mentioned the maintenance. We're asking them to put together a real annual budget so that we can see what the inflows and outflows really are. We've mentioned the audit. We're asking them to look at not only within themselves on the board, but also the day-to-day management of the club, and see if any changes need to be made there as well. So this is a pretty comprehensive conditions and requirements of giving them this 90-day reprieve. There is no forgiveness of any of the taxes. There is no forgiveness of any of the amounts owed under the loan. There are some deferrals, but there's no forgiveness. They still owe us what they owe us. And we would expect that this plan would address both the repayment of any back monies due, as well as how they're going to continue to pay us on the rest of the monies that are due. So,
Any other council discussion? Councilmember Chiller.
Thank you. I just want to start out by, number one, acknowledging, appreciating some of these folks wanting to create a solid foundation. I met with Mr. Nertney last week, and we talked about exposure to the city because we're facing our own challenges. Property taxes were one of those issues. Maintenance of the course, which 2 days later, you guys took care of some of the rough areas. I appreciate that. Question I have a couple of them, but the one is, does the board agree to the reorganization plan? I haven't heard that from your side. So we at least have discussion, we're on the same page.
Yes, we read the stipulations or conditions, and we're in agreement.
Okay. I just want to understand the plan, because, a little bit, because we just got this, and I haven't discussed it with the city manager. It says the club responsible for payment of taxes due in November 2017. And then it goes on to talk about taxes for 2018, with the understanding that, the club will pay those back. You address the 2017 taxes to be paid with the 4 to 5 month period. Is that my understanding?
Correct.
Okay, okay. And then 18, I would imagine would probably be prorated as originally agreed in our agreement.
I would expect, I didn't think about it in that detail, but yes, we'll just continue to make payments so
Okay.
that 18 will be paid
Okay,
by November.
Okay. And then the city is going to, Mr. Stevenson, what, I'd imagine we want to give the club the flexibility to do their due diligence in trying to come up with a reorganization plan. With that, I'd imagine that some of these conditions will be starting to move along in conjunction with their operation of whatever they're doing, you're going to be doing, or this, you and Mr. Pogorich. There's one thing in here, you talked about the audit. What is your, help me understand that. I mean, if they're looking at their 90 days, what is what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think some of these, obviously, some of the criteria in these conditions need to be in conjunction with the 90 days while they do their reorganization. That's a given. As far as how we're going to conduct that, I don't know that, quite honestly, I haven't had conversation with them yet about that. We certainly need to have that conversation. I didn't want to start proceeding with that conversation until I knew the council was going to be okay with this whole program. If council provides the board or the club with that 90-day window, I'd be more than happy to bring something back next meeting. We can certainly organize ourselves. That's one of those things that David and I have not, Mr. Pogorich, I'm sorry, and the board have talked about. They have agreed to it. They know what we're looking to do. And again, without getting involved with the day-to-day business or interfering with the day-to-day business, we certainly need to put something together. I think that we can get a little bit better handle as far as the council is concerned on where payables and receivables are, so on and so forth. We haven't had that conversation yet, but if you approve this to move forward tonight, we can certainly have that conversation tomorrow. So,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nerdy.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from Councilmember
I
Ross?
do have just a question. I'm in agreement with all of these conditions, and I'm in agreement with approving the club's request for an extension of 90 days under these conditions. My question is, has our attorney looked at these conditions?
It's my understanding that he has.
I've looked, Mr. Ross, I've looked at the conditions generally, and what I see in here is a situation where the city is granting deferrals on payments in a manner that's very similar to what the city has granted in the past, which is something that the city can certainly do.
I guess I'm looking for some reassurance. Does this in any way hinder our position, our current position? In other words, if we get to January and things are still, have we hurt ourselves in any way by doing this?
Well, you're granting them, I mean, your alternative at this point is to find them in default, and you've got certain remedies under the lease that you can exercise, and the ultimate remedy is terminating the lease. So what I understand this is from my discussions with Mr. Stevenson, is this is a mechanism for the city to work with the leadership at the club to try to help them get back on track so that they're in a position to start making payments again under the lease.
I understand what it is. I just want to make sure that this is not impeding our potential remedies in the original agreement.
Well, at this point, I mean, you haven't modified anything. I mean, in order to do some of these things, you're going to need to modify the terms of the lease with the club. And so to the extent that ultimately they come back to you with a plan and you implement that plan through modifications to the terms of your lease, you can include terms in there to ensure that, the city's inaction on its available remedies is not to be used against it as some sort of tacit agreement with, or with the default that the club is taking. But, I mean, what you're essentially doing by agreeing to this is you're giving the club a period of time to try to work out the default. So, I mean, to the extent that you're impeding your ability to go forward, yes, you would be, because you're giving them time to cure a default that you otherwise don't have to give to them.
But I think what
I-
Mr. Ross is
I-
asking
I'm
is,
sorry.
have we acquiesced on any rights or remedies?
That's
under-
what I'm
under-
trying to get
under
at.
the-
That's
under the
that's the
agreement-
answer I'm looking for. I know
Under the,
what,
under the agreement or under Florida law, yes or no?
I don't understand the question. I mean, under Florida law, you've got the ability at this point to declare them in default and take action against them.
Yeah, but-
So, but by agreeing to work out a reorganization plan, are you somehow waiving your rights under the lease documents and other
question.
documents? The answer is no.
Thank you.
thank you.
I would suggest, I have no problems with these conditions. I would suggest that it all be put in writing and executed by both parties. I would also ask that what you just stated, that we are not waiving any of the rights of the current agreement by exercise, by these additional conditions. And at the end of the 90-day period, Mr. Nerdney had told me that at that point, we're going to tell you, we can make it or we can't. What I want is a mutual agreement in place that if they can't, it will be a voluntary turnover and not a battle in court. I want the club to succeed. The folks of that organization know it better than anybody. I don't believe that the use of this particular facility, and I mean the golf course, I don't see it any other way. If that golf course was not there, Temple Terrace would not be the city it is. I don't think anybody up here is saying, let's get rid of these folks and bring in these folks. I don't think that's the issue here, but we have to, the rubber has to hit the pavement at some point, and we have to stop the bleeding one way or the other, or at least lessen the bleeding, shall I say. So anything we agree to, these conditions, if we agree to them, fine. But I would like, in addition to these agreements, that there be legal language that the attorneys address of the things I just mentioned. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, because I don't want to get to day 90 and say, then there's a new issue or there's more things to worry about. I want us to know 90 days, good, we'll work with you. We want to give you every opportunity based on what you're telling us. When day 90 comes, if it can take off, wonderful. If it can't, what happens? And I think we need to know that as well. I don't want to get that far down the road without having a clear roadmap as to which way we go at that point in time. Okay? Obviously, the rest of you guys.
Councilmember Donahue, Jim? All right, and I think what the city manager kind of said, because I'm in agreement with this also, is I think before they move forward with creating what Frank just talked about, was the issue of us voting to approve that we move forward in this direction with the club prior to getting into more formalized letters and issues like that. So that can certainly be included. I think that would be helpful for us. But I think once we can agree to this, then we can formalize the documentation, I would think. But I didn't think there was a point of moving ahead with it
Right.
until we actually got agreement on it
I agree.
from our board. So if we have, I would certainly entertain a motion to give direction to the staff and to the club that we are in agreement with these items, along with the date change to January 16th for the presentation, and have included in there what also Councilmember Chalour mentioned.
And I'll make the motion in a moment, but I do want to let everybody here in council and in the audience know that concurrent with the 90 days that the club is coming up, we are
Charles and I will be working on a contingent plan in the event that their plan doesn't work. I think that's just doing our due diligence. We have high hopes that it will work. We want it to work. We pray that it works. But at the end of the 90 days, we need to know if it isn't going to work, we need to have a contingency plan. And that's something that we'll be working on as well during that 90 days. So with that, I would move that we, let's make sure I say this right, that we allow the country club a 90-day, is deferment the right word, Mr. Connolly?
Well, I think what, based upon the discussion I heard with Mr. Chaleur, we're talking about drafting up an agreement. Essentially, we're going to draft up a modification to the lease agreement to include terms that would be similar to the terms that are in the document before you. So I think the direction would be to give direction to city staff, myself, and the club to prepare an amendment to the lease to include terms that are set forth in the document in front of us.
And do we need a motion to do that?
Yes.
Okay. So I move that we direct our city attorney and city manager to develop a modification to the lease agreement that would include the conditions as set forth in the document entitled Golf Course Reorganization Plan, October 2017, which lists items A through I, which would be conditions to the modification of the lease agreement.
I second that motion.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is.
Yes, Councilman Ross.
This has kind of morphed a little bit, and I'm okay with it, but I want to make sure the clock started running on their default when we gave them a demand letter. The lease dictates that they have a set number of days to respond to the demand letter and do these. If we're now creating an amendment to the lease, let's just suppose that this runs out in January. They come back before us and they say, you know what, we're still working on it, we can't. Does that clock now on the default have to start over again because we in essence forgave their default for this 90-day period?
Well,
Do we have to start this demand letter 60 days? Does that whole thing start over again?
well, I think based on the request of Mr. Chaleur, at the end of that 90 days, that the golf club would voluntarily agree that they are in default, and there's no 90-day clock, and that they would just hand over the keys at that point, I think is what the suggestion was.
Yeah, and based upon the discussion with Mr. Chalura, would include language that there'd be no waiver of the city's rights and remedies under the agreement. As far as there being something at the end of the 90-day period for a turnover, I mean, that's something that would have to be discussed with the club, because at the end of 90 days, if there's if they have not given you the plan that you expect to have, then the question would be, what are you going to do? And I heard that you'd be working on a contingency plan, but your options are relatively limited. You close the doors to the club, you retain another entity to operate the club on the city's behalf, or the city retains its own forces to operate the club itself. And so, see, the representative of the club is here, I suspect, to talk about that issue. But, I mean, that's something that would have to determine exactly how do we want to handle that at that time period.
We'll recognize Mr. Whittemore to go ahead and
Thank you,
give
Mr.
your name,
Vice
please,
Mayor,
and
and-
address the concerns of Councilmember Ross regarding this issue.
Yes, thank you. Don Whittemore, 1303 North River Hills. As John said, thank you very much for working with us. I agree with Councilmember Ross that it's morphed a little bit beyond what we had intended to try to accomplish tonight. What we had intended to accomplish was to give us some breathing room. And Mr. Connolly and I will recognize that, I think in legal parlance, what we're looking for is a forbearance period. In other words, don't withdraw the default notice. Just give us an assurance, and if it's in writing, that's perfectly fine with us, that you will forbear taking any action based on the default for the period of time that we've requested. I can assure you that we would agree in that document that the forbearance period would not result in any kind of a waiver or any detriment to the city's exercise of its rights under the lease if the plan is not approved at the end of this period. The city would then be able to exercise all rights that it would otherwise be able to do right now with no detriment. What I'm not prepared to agree to, because I don't believe I have the authority as the president of the club without getting the approval not only of the board, but perhaps even our membership, would be an agreement to hand over the keys at the end of the 90-day period. I mean, that is a significant act on behalf of the club. Now, we may have to. We may make the decision that we would not contest the city's efforts to actually terminate. I will tell you that, as I've said in front of this council before, the city and the club have been sisters for nearly 100 years. I don't expect a fight. I don't expect us to get into litigation if the city ultimately made the decision that enough is enough, we're taking the property back. But I don't believe that I've got the authority tonight to tell you that we can simply agree tonight to hand over the keys at the end of the 90-day period. I think we will have significant issues to talk about, and the council will have significant decisions to make if we aren't able to come up with a plan. But to that extent, everything else that's been discussed tonight, we're in total agreement with. It's just the one feature, and I understand the point. A typical forbearance agreement in a normal loan arrangement, because I've done plenty of those in my legal practice, is that at the end of the forbearance period, the borrower says, we're done. But I'm not prepared to make that agreement tonight, simply because I don't believe I have authority to. So with that, everything else has been agreeable. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a motion, and a second. Is there any further discussion?
I'm not going to be able to agree unless I know what's going to happen at the end of the 90-day period. You're going to give 90 days. What happens? You know, we had very candid conversations, and I have no problem with giving an opportunity. For the last 3 months, we struggled where the next dollar is going to come from. Redevelopments beating us over the head. We have the country club that we've worked with. There's not been any mortgage payments since April. And I want to work with them. I don't have any other agendas. I want to work with them. But when agreements are reached, there is an exit plan or a continuation plan. I want to know what that plan is. What are you going to come back and ask for another 90 days then? I don't know that. So we're going to give something. In return, it would be nice if we can give the taxpayers, the citizens, an assurance saying we're giving more time, but here's the conditions. Here's what's going to happen if they can't come up with it. Something's got to be in place, or else you can give them 6 more months. If there's no conditions at the end of the 90-day period, then why even do it? You got to have something in place. And if at the end of 90 days, they have a really good plan, it sounds good, and you want to back off of that condition or massage it, and so be it. But in business, normally, you give and you take a little bit. We're giving, and we've been giving for a while, because the golf course is a very important part of our city. And I totally, sincerely mean that. But in return, this has been going on for some time now. And I, for one, would like to see what happens at the end of 90 days. If there's a condition and they're very close and it sounds very promising, there's nothing against us modifying that. But what if there's not? I was told in my conversations that, hey, in 90 days, we're going to know whether we can do this or not. That's what I was told. So I'm relying on that. And I was like, okay, you know, I would be willing to give 90 more days to help move this forward and give every opportunity. I didn't come up with the 90-day schedule. It was proposed to me by the folks from the club when they met with me. So that must have been the comfort level that they're looking for. They didn't say, you know, 120, and I said 90. They said 90. and I'm good with that. I'm good with it. But there should be a condition at the end of the 90-day period, and I totally understand and respect Mr. Whittemore's position that he can't make that decision, and I understand that. But once he finds out from the board, if they can, what they can do and what the city's willing to do, then maybe that, another discussion takes place. I certainly don't want to hinder their abilities. They're moving forward. I had indicated to them that I would support the additional 90 days if certainly the taxes could be paid and the golf course maintained and a couple of other issues, and they've committed to do that, which is great. I'm satisfied with that. But I was also told at the end of 90 days, we're going to know if we're going to swim or we're going to sink. So we need to know what happens at the end of 90 days.
Yep.
So I would just like to see something in place at the end of 90 days. That can be amended, but something should be there, at least to give me a comfort level. Thank you.
Councilmember Donahue.
It was my understanding that if the club was in default, we had several options. Obviously, I think you referred to it, Mr. Pogorlich, the nuclear option was to take the keys. But we also have to change management, to change the board. So I would hope that at the end of the 90 days, we wouldn't go straight for the nuclear. That if that's the case and they say, well, it doesn't look like we can do it, then we have some options. And those options are to play out the options that are already in our contract. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't think we have to go for the juggler here, as if they say they can't do it, we have to say, okay, that's it, close the doors. So we still have lots of options here, even at the end of the 90-day period. So I don't think we're boxing ourselves into a corner. I don't think we're boxing you into a corner and making you make a decision, like, as you said, that you cannot stand here tonight and say, absolutely, we'll hand you the keys on January 16th. So I think we should just go ahead and approve this, let them get on with their business of putting this plan in action. It sounds to me that they have a lot of different methods. I do like the fact that you are hiring it aggressively going after marketing. That's one of the things, even the city of Temple Terrace, we've always said we're our best kept secret, okay? And so, and I think that the club has been guilty of that as well. So there are things in place. I really do like all of the suggestions. I think you can also find, perhaps, everybody's talking about finding all these retired accountants. I'll bet there's a retired business guru out there who can help you write a plan as well, that you wouldn't have to pay for. So I think we're ready to vote, to be honest with you. It sounds like we're all in agreement. We just need to recognize that
We'll do a forbearance agreement.
the end result may not be happening the day we hear the word from the club.
Councilmember Pogorlich.
Thank you. And I just want to piggyback on that idea. You're right, there are a number of options in the agreement. I think where we kind of diverged a little bit here is Mr. Chalor suggested that you guys wouldn't, at the end of the 90 days, if it's not going to work, that you would just voluntarily say, here's the keys. And you're saying you don't have not sure you have the power to do that, and I don't know that you would want to agree to that right now anyway. So we do have options. I think it's important that we get something in writing that says that we're not giving up any rights or remedies that we have under the original agreement or under law. But there are a number of options, like you stated, Ms. Donahue, including, us taking the keys, which nobody really wants to do that at this point anyway. So I think that maybe what we should do is get something called a forbearance agreement, get that drafted up to include this, that identifies that we're not giving up any of our rights or remedies, and I think they'll sign that. Whether or not they want to fight us at the end, whether they want, if we were to foreclose today, I would imagine that there'd be a bit of a fight. And not because we're not sisters or we're not brothers, but because it's too big an issue for you guys to just lay down. Okay, I understand that. But I think we got to get something in writing, as Mr. Chalor suggested, not so much that you just hand things over, but we can put together a forbearance agreement or something similar to that, that includes the conditions and ensures that the city is not giving up any of its rights or remedies under the agreement, and we can move forward from there. That's my suggestion.
There's no further comment. Motion's been made and seconded, and all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion is carried.
And I'll just, for a point of clarification, indicate the document that I'll be preparing. And I agree that a forbearance agreement is likely the best way to handle this in light of the relationship that includes a lease relationship and a loan relationship. And by including a forbearance agreement, we can make reference to multiple documents. We can have an acknowledgement on the part of the club that they acknowledge that they've received a default notice from the city, that they are in default, and that the city is, at this point in time, granting them a time period to cure, and we're not waiving any rights or remedies. So that's the document that I'll be preparing.
Okay.
Thank you. We're going to move back to the regular order of business. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight and taking the time to listen to us as we moved our agenda around. The first item is a public hearing. Item 6, public hearings, ordinances, resolution. Item A is a resolution approving an agreement with the Cardi 8th Avenue Development LLC for a partial release of lien. City Attorney Mark Conley will explain.
Vice Mayor, members of City Council, as you recall a few meetings ago, I brought before you an agreement with Mr. Holland that provided a partial lien release with regard to property that he owns in Ybor City. Mr. Holland requested that terms be placed into the agreement at the last moment that were problematic, and so that did not go forward. Subsequently, counsel for the buyer, Accardi Development, reached out to me and advised that they'd be willing to pay $50,000 for a partial release of lien under very similar terms or almost identical terms to the agreement that was provided to you over a month ago. So what they've asked is for the city to execute a partial release of lien as to the property that's owned by Mr. Holland in Ybor City in exchange for the payment of the sum of $50,000 for a lien release. The principal condition of that is that the IRS tax lien that encumbers all of Mr. Holland's properties would be paid by the proceeds of the sale. So you have before you an agreement that's effectively the same as one that you saw approximately a month ago.
I'll ask if there's any comments from the public on this item. Seeing no public comments, we'll turn it over to council discussion. Is there any discussion on this item? If it's acceptable, I entertain a motion to approve the agreement with Accardi 8th Avenue Development LLC for a partial release of lien.
Move to approve the resolution approving an agreement with Accardi 8th Avenue Development LLC for a partial release of lien with a payment of $50,000 to the city of Temple Terrace.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Is there any further council discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. We're going to move on to item 6B. This is a resolution approving an employment agreement for city attorney services. The city manager, Charles Stevenson, will explain.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Before you this evening is a resolution to approve the employment agreement between the city and Ms. Pamela Cichone for the position of city attorney. At our September 8th city council meeting, we held a special meeting to interview 3 candidates to serve as in-house legal counsel. At the conclusion of that interview session, council decided unanimously to offer the position to Mr. Cichone. Council also appointed Mr. Ross, our Human Resource Director, Janet Bledsoe, and myself to pursue negotiations with Pamela in an employment agreement. We were able to do that. Ms. Cichone has agreed to the terms of the agreement and essentially pays her $125,000 annually. Her start date would be November 6th of this year. With that, we recommend approval of the employment agreement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Is there any comment from the public on this? Seeing none, we'll turn it over to council discussion. Councilmember Donahue.
Thank you. After the interviews, we had some information that came to light that put a question to me and to all of us as to whether during the interviews, the candidate had been forthcoming with the reason that she left her employment. And I did talk to Mr. Stevenson about it, and he said, as far as his feeling was that it was a non-issue, that no one else had brought it up, and that it wasn't something that was either his responsibility to prove or disprove, or, I mean, you most likely saw the email. So in that case, since I know where Mr. Stevenson feels, I'd like to ask, whether you volunteered or not, Mr. Ross, who's our representative, a couple of questions. After hearing about those issues and before you came up with the contract, did you in fact reach out to the candidate and ask her to tell us why, when asked why she left employment, why she said one reason, and then now we understand that to be not quite the same? And, if you did, was there a response, and did you follow up with the city of St. Petersburg to find out if there was, to have 2 articles in the Tampa Tribune referring specifically to this, I think is a red flag. And I'm really sorry that I'm even having to say this, because I recognize that the candidate is in the room tonight, and I'm sure this is embarrassing to her, and it's hard for me as well. So I want to hear what you have to say, because I'm ready to ask that we postpone this decision tonight until we know all the facts, until we hear all the whys and what fors and what happened. Once again, I'm not pointing a finger. I just want to make sure this is a very important thing. This is something that we, as a council, have to make this decision. And so I'll turn it over. If you don't mind, if Mr. Ross could answer the question.
That's okay with the Vice Mayor. And Mrs. Donahue, I'm glad you asked me. I wish that people had asked me before they rushed to judgment based on the contents of one article on TVT. I think it's extremely unfair for people to rush to judgment based on one article in the media. And so your question is fair. I think that we had to do due diligence, and I take my role very seriously. Even though I didn't volunteer for it, I took it very seriously. We did do follow-up on this. We went all the way back with the Bar Association to the very beginning of Mrs. Cichon's career, which is 36 years that she's been in the bar. She has absolutely 0 disciplinary history. We went to St. Petersburg, to the city of St. Pete, and looked at her personnel file, because the only thing you'll get from a previous employer these days is confirmation of employment dates. That's all you're going to get. We went to the city of St. Petersburg and looked at the file. There's absolutely nothing in there pertaining to this allegation in the media. There's no discipline, there's no letter of reprimand, there's no memos pertaining to this. There's no indication that she was asked to leave or retire as a result of this. Therefore, because the assumption has been made by some that she misrepresented herself here, that she was forced out, when in fact she said she left to go into family business.
Right.
Well, there's no reason to make that conclusion, because there's absolutely nothing at St. Petersburg in her file to indicate that she misrepresented anything. So yes, we did do due diligence. Thank you for asking. And I wish that we had had this conversation before this woman was publicly slandered on Facebook and in other formats, whether she agrees to take the job or not, or whether we agree to employ her or not. This is not the way to treat people that apply for a job at the city. And I'm embarrassed that we treated her. No.
I gotta ask everybody just to
Yeah,
let
I'm
Councilmember Ross
embarrassed that
finish his
that we
discussion,
did
please.
this. I
Thank
mean,
you.
we got emails from people in the public saying that they had rushed to judgment. They had, we this and that and the other. From what? The contents of a TBT article? That's what you're basing her legal abilities and her background on? Come on, if you've been in public life at all, it's not long before somebody's going to write something negative
I
about
understand.
you. So, anyway, to answer your question, I'm sorry to get passionate about it. I'm not passionate about the question, thank you. I'm passionate that we have people rushing to judgment on one way or the other. And my response to that was that I have full confidence in our HR. We huddled up and said, we've got to dig deeper on this, which included asking the candidate, what's your side of this story, right? And she has a very good side of it. I won't pretend to say it. You want to ask her, she's here, she can explain it herself. But to me, she explained it very well. One of her references that she listed is the mayor. Well, I don't think she's going to use the mayor as a reference if she was forced out, right? And she misrepresented herself. So long and the short of it is, I hope I haven't over-answered your question. But
Not- absolutely
I'm
not.
comfortable. I don't
No.
know Ms. Cichon. I only met her the time when she came here for an interview. This is not somebody that but I have hired a lot of people in my day. I see no reason not to move forward based on this TBT article. I
And-
just don't.
And if I just might.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why it needed to be asked tonight and answered tonight.
Sure.
Because you're right, the public perception is one thing, and if we don't address it in public, then we know the answer and no one else does. So I'm, as I say, I'm sorry that this had to happen in this type of environment, but the only way to get the answer is to ask it in public. So I appreciate that you have the answer. I'm delighted that you have an answer and that it's a good one. And knowing that, you know, you've actually spoken to her and done your due diligence, that is exactly what I was going for. So thank you. That-
Is there any other discussion? Mr.
Mr.
Stevenson.
Mayor, if I can add one thing here to this. Ms. Shown has agreed to the terms of this agreement, and she has signed the agreement.
Thank you. If there's no more discussion, and this is acceptable, I'll entertain a motion approving the employment agreement with Pamela Shoshone for the provision of,
I hate to do this, but there actually is one item in here that I
Okay.
want to discuss.
okay, so.
Personally, this is not my decision, but personally speaking, I'm of the opinion that the city attorney should live in the city of Temple Terrace. This agreement is that she will reside within 10 miles. Now, I will yield to whatever the majority of the council feels about that. Personally, I think she should live within the city, but that's just my opinion.
I agree.
Can we hear from Mrs. Shawn as to what the importance of 10 miles is?
She didn't put it in there, we did.
Oh, we did?
We did.
Oh, okay, well, I'm in agreement with you. Do you have a problem living within the city limits?
I have no problem living within the
If you could just come to the podium and address council, please provide your name. Thank you.
Pam Shoshone. I have no problem living within the city limits. I've spent several hours already just in the last couple of days looking at properties only within the city limits of Temple Terrace because that would be my preference. I have not even looked out 10 miles yet. One thing I would like to bring up, though, is in the agreement, it indicates that that if I were to be fired for no reason, if you change your mind about even having in-house counsel, you can simply terminate me. If I am going to enter into a one-year lease and you want me to live here within 6 months, there it provides for no severance until a whole entire year has passed. The agreement wants me to live here within 6 months. Therefore, that's meaning that I have to either purchase property, which is what I would like to do, but if I can't find something, or if I'm going to build, because I actually looked at a vacant lot, it means that I would have to rent here, and there are not too many landlords who will give you less than a one-year lease. So that would mean that I would be committed to a one-year lease, and yet there would be a period of time in which, if you change your mind about me being here, there would be no severance until a whole year had passed. So that leaves me with a one-year lease here in Temple Terrace and no compensation. So I would ask that you consider maybe something as a severance if, after the 6 months when I'm required to be here and before the 1 year expires, that there be something.
So would it be acceptable to you if we backed the timetables up, all of them in that paragraph, 6 months?
That
Would
would
that
be,
solve the
That would be wonderful.
Look, I'm not saying we're gonna do that, we're gonna
So,
talk, but,
Yeah.
so essentially we give her a year to move?
well,
No,
there's
no,
a,
I would still live here, I would still move within 6 months. But as I said, there's a 6-month, there's a gap in there then of 6 months, that if there was termination for no cause at all, I would still be committed to being here,
Right.
possibly under a 1-year lease with no
it's
severance.
section 13 is the part she's talking about.
Okay.
And Mrs. Bledsoe and I actually sat down together and revised this paragraph, so this is our language. Personally speaking, and I can't speak for everybody, I don't have a problem in light of this, backing this timetable up for all of, because there's a schedule in there of how much she gets if she's terminated from 1 year to, you know, let's just back that whole thing up 6 months. Would solve the problem or solve the issue. I wouldn't have a problem with that personally.
So instead of after 12 months, it says after 6 months?
And then after 24
Okay.
months, it'd be 18, and
Yeah.
after 36, it'd be 30, and just back all of those up 6 months.
I don't have a problem with that.
I'm
That's-
okay with that.
So you're looking to change 2 sections, residency, section 5, and then also make a change in section 13?
Yes.
To be commensurate with the change you're making in
Yes.
section 5?
Yes.
You've negotiated your first contract change.
And I will say that in our negotiations with her, these are the only 2 changes that she's asked for. So, well, she didn't ask for the residency, I did. But this is it. This
So
is- there's
5
been
doesn't
no-
change.
What's
Five-
that?
5 doesn't change.
No, well, it does.
Yeah, it does. If
The
she-
10 miles comes out.
yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You're just getting, basically,
Yeah.
the city attorney agrees to maintain a principal residence
Within Temple.
within the city of Temple Terrace, so
Yeah.
you're getting rid of 10 miles
Yeah.
of,
And Janet and Charles and I had discussion about that. The reason that we didn't change it in here was I thought it was presumptuous of me to change that without consultation with the rest of you. So I didn't take it upon myself to change it.
Okay.
and then you're also looking to adjust it in section 13, the line that says that the city attorney is terminated for any reason within the first 6 months. There'll be no severance pay, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Well, no, that's not what
No,
she said.
no, no, no.
Because what she's saying is if she gets terminated for no reason within 6 months, she's still stuck with a 6-month lease.
If you look at the top of page 4.
All right, so I just need to know what you're changing in there, so we know
Okay,
what we're
I'll tell
voting
you,
on.
I'll tell you. If you look at the top of page 4, the third paragraph down starts out, if the city attorney is terminated without cause by the city, then the city shall pay the city attorney a lump sum payment in according with the following schedule. And then there's 4 different bullets. I would back each of those 4 up 6 months. So section 1 says after 12 months of employment, she would get 4 weeks. I would change that to after 6 months of employment. Section 2 is after 24 months, back that up to after 18 months. The next section 3 says after 36 months, back that up to 30 months. And section 4 is after 48 months, back that up to 42 months.
Okay.
Is that correct, Ms. Shum?
Yes,
And you're okay with that?
yes.
Okay.
Is everyone in agreement
I'm in
with
agreement.
how Councilmember Ross explained the modifications to the
I'm in agreement.
employment agreement? Okay, so, then if it's acceptable, unless somebody else has any other discussion on the item, if it's acceptable, I'll entertain a motion approving the employment agreement with Pamela Shoshone for the provision, I guess it's supposed to say position of the city attorney services effective November 6th, 2017, with the amendments that recited in section 5, residency, and backing down of the 6 months in the section of termination, section 13, termination and severance pay. Is there a motion?
It's your
No,
motion.
So moved.
There's a motion,
Second.
is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Nay. I'm following your trend.
Welcome to Temple
No,
Terrace.
there's no nays.
Thank you.
And
Sorry.
hang around, I want to introduce myself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I suspect we're going to have to modify this to get all, I have a
Yeah.
bunch of them signed in
Yeah.
there. We're going to move on to item C, which is a first public hearing and first reading on an ordinance on a development order amendment to Tampa Telecom Park DRI number 116. Public hearing is now open.
Lorraine Lynn Community Development, as you stated, this is an amendment to one of two DRIs that's in the city. It's the Tampa Telecom Park DRI number 116. It's located at the southwest corner of Fletcher Avenue and I-75, and it's a office corporate park DRI consisting of 326 acres that was approved by City Council in 1985. It has an extension build-out date of July 13, 2022, and the latest annual report states that 65% of the external trips are 65% of the approved trips. So from a build-out standpoint, the project is 55% build-out in terms of square footage, but only 86% build-out in terms of land. So in other words, we have a lot more entitlements than we do land. So recently, we have received a rezoning from PROF to PD for parcel 7A, which is located on the south side of Fletcher Avenue between Telecom Drive and Telecom Parkway. The applicant is proposing to do retail uses. However, map H of the DRI states that the permitted uses are offices. So staff had a meeting with the applicant as well as other agencies, because as you know, a DRI requires state review. We met with DOT, conference, the Department of Economic Opportunity, Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and Hillsborough County, because Fletcher Avenue is a county right-of-way. That meeting occurred on the 23rd of August to discuss how to accomplish the retail uses on parcel 7A. Following the meeting, there was an agreement that map H and the equivalency matrix needed to be updated. There was also concurrence that an administrative modification per Florida statutes 380.0619E2 would be sufficient since no additional trips or entitlements were involved. With that, staff is recommending 3 changes to the development order. To amend map H, to add 2 new access points onto Fletcher Avenue. They would be right-in, right-outs that will be permitted by Hillsborough County. To amend the equivalency matrix to actually update some of those trip generation rates for office, and to use the shopping center general retail uses per the ITE rates. And the third amendment would be to remove Site A on parcel 7A. The site plan that was submitted shows 6 out parcels. Site A would be the most western parcel. And that parcel alone will be exempted from the sign regulations in the current DRI. Their regulations will be per the city code. So with that, staff recommends these amendments to the development order of Tampa Telecom Park.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn. I'm going to ask for, are there any comments or questions from the general public? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and I will close the public hearing. And council member comments. You have any comments?
I'm sorry that there wasn't a map for the public to see, because I had the map that I have, and I think they're doing the same thing, but I understand where it is, and so we're actually, the reason the change for the signs is that it's more in tune with what we do in our regular business
That's correct.
signage, rather than the telecom park, which has a
That's
very
correct.
limited sign.
That's
And would not
correct.
work for a business on Fletcher Avenue.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's a retail
Yes,
establishment. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from council? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the City of Temple Terrace, Florida, amending Temple Terrace Ordinance Number 544 as amended by Ordinance Number 585, Ordinance Number 600, Ordinance Number 682, Ordinance Number 717, Ordinance Number 821, Ordinance Number 1001, Ordinance Number 1133, Ordinance Number 1150, Ordinance Number 1162, Ordinance Number 1187, Ordinance Number 1201, and Ordinance Number 1206, together constituting a development order issued pursuant to Chapter 380, Florida statutes for GTE/Collier 326, also known as Tampa Telecom Park, DRI, a development of regional impact, providing findings of fact, providing conclusions of law, providing specific revisions to map H, the equivalency matrix and application of signage requirements, and repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith.
And Mr. Vice Mayor, before any action is taken, if the applicant's here and wants to speak on this item, or any residents want to speak on the item, if you've already offered them to do so, I apologize for missing that. But we need to give them the opportunity to speak if they'd like to speak.
Okay, I didn't realize the applicant was here. I did ask for public comment, so if the applicant would like to make any presentation.
Only if there's any questions. Okay.
Thank you.
And my apologies if I wasn't listening, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Okay, if the ordinance is, and I was not aware they were here, so if the ordinance is acceptable, Vice Mayor Boss, I will entertain a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading. Is there a motion?
Teleprompter.
Yeah.
I moved, sorry. Okay, I moved that we approve on first reading an ordinance on a development order amendment to Tampa Telecom Park, DRI number 116.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion is carried. We'll go to item number 7, council business. Anybody have any council business?
I do.
Councilmember Donahue.
As a representative of the Hart Board, I spent the day Friday riding the bus. And it had been said that the Hart Board members did not ride the bus. And I wanted to prove the author, you're talking about read one article. And so I can tell you right now that I learned a lot. People who ride public transportation speak public transportation, and I was listening. To that effect, I'm working with Hart. We're still working out bus number 57, Route 57. We're not there yet, but we're still working on it. And I will be holding a meeting on Friday, October 6th at 9:30 at the Nantucket Bay Apartments. So if anybody is interested in talking to the staff, we will be there. I also want to invite everyone to Art Meets Agriculture. It's at Greco Middle School on Friday, October 13th at 9 a.m. And there's a beautiful mural that will support the program at the horticulture and nutrition program at Greco Middle School. So I believe I sent an invitation to everyone on council, but I wanted the general public to know. And then I want to address Mrs. Fernandez's points about the outside internal audit. I could not agree with her more that we do not need to hire an auditor at this time. When we received the CAFR last year from our certified public accountants, you know, Moore, Stevens, Lovelace, PA, they were not kind to us, okay? They were honest, but they pointed out some serious deficits. Matter of fact, the type of finding showed material weakness, which is not a good thing. And the criteria, just to let you know, of material weakness is a deficiency or combinations of deficiencies in internal control, such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement of the entity's financial statements will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. The criteria is that the city's management is responsible for establishing and maintaining internal controls over financial accounting and reporting to ensure the financial statements are fairly represented in conformity with US GAAP. And the recommendation was that the city management strengthen internal controls and procedures over financial accounting and reporting. Now, all of us who went through the budget process recognize that we're not there yet. And so I would like to make sure that before we do anything different, that we actually insist that these items be addressed and that we get a report back that says all of the notations have been addressed. And maybe they already have, which would be wonderful. Once that happens, then I think we need to do, and Mrs. Fernandez is not here to hear that I'm agreeing with her, but we know that our budget process was very weak. Apparently, our internal controls have some issues, and I would like to entertain that when we get to that point, that we tap into the resources that we have in our community, and we have other advisory councils that we set up. We have school support, we have River Watch Task Force, I mean, all those. There would be a way for us to entertain applicants and to make a decision. I do not want this to be an in-house audit. I think the fact that our procedures are what are in question, and please don't take this as an indictment here, but we can't check it ourselves, okay? If the procedures aren't working, and I see Mr. Stevenson smiling over that, I'm not pointing fingers at you. I'm just saying, someone else needs to come in who is not either at the risk of being fired or reprimanded or warned or anything else about bringing up or bringing to light a situation that they think is important or is being mishandled. Needs to be completely independent. So I know we have an audit committee and you have your job, but I don't think that's the job of this committee. This needs to be outside people coming in. First, I'd like to make sure that everything that the CAFR told us to do is done. And after that, we can move forward to do the internal audit. So that's, I'm just making comments. It's only public comment. I don't need a vote or a yes or a no. I just needed to make sure that you understand where I'm coming from when you make your presentation in the near future. Thank you.
Is there any other council business? Councilmember
I have
Ross.
two things very, very quickly. One is we've got a very nice letter commending Public Works that came to all the council members. I meant to bring it so that I could read it for the public, but in my rush to get out for National Night Out, I forgot it. So I will bring it maybe next time. But the public is very appreciative of Public Works and all the hard work that they've done. We have had some comments from the public about why is it taking so long to get the tree debris picked up. Actually, it's not taking as long as we expected. It's going quicker. It seems like a long time if it's in your front yard, but one of the challenges the city has faced, if you're watching this on TV or at home, I know none of you are guilty of this, but there's a lot of people taking advantage of this situation by cutting trees and debris that's not storm damage and dragging it out to the street. I know for a fact firsthand that you can go down a street that's been cleared with the claw truck. I'm near and dear to the claw truck, by the way. And you can go down that same street tomorrow and it's got new stuff out there that's freshly cut, that's not hurricane stuff. So that's part of what's slowing the process down. So please help us in that regard and spread the word to your neighbors. The other thing I'd like to do real quick is to congratulate publicly Tom Baroni. Most of you know that Tom is a longtime city employee, been in code compliance for many, many years. I've been privileged to work with Tom during my time on the code board. He's been performing as the interim director of code compliance, and he was named today as the full-time permanent director of code compliance. So that's a good thing for Tom, and it's a good thing for the city. So thank you. That's all I have.
Any other council business? We'll go back to item 8, new business. Is there any additional new business aside from the item we already addressed? Seeing none, we'll go to city manager's report.
I don't have anything, Mr. Vice Mayor.
There's being no business, further business coming before council. The meeting is adjourned. If everyone can try and get over to the, well, the meeting's over, but you can speak to us.
Well, I was waiting to see if you'd ask if anybody wanted to speak, but anyhow,
On what?
I'm sorry.
That was earlier.
But what happened here after that is what I want to talk about.
Go ahead, I don't know what you wanted to talk about, but.
Well, I've been a proponent of the city attorney for a long time. And unfortunately, I wasn't here for the last couple of meetings because I had to be out of town on family business. But walking into this room and seeing our new city attorney sitting there, and to have her called out in a public forum